a change to make it go to the website, but it's streaming right now, you can go ahead.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all stand. If you don't, please mute your phone before the meeting starts. We don't want anybody's phone ringing up while the meeting's going on. Let's have a word of prayer. Father in heaven, thank you, Lord, for a beautiful day you provided for us today. Lord, help us to do the things that we need to do as we chair this county meeting. Lord, we thank you for the many blessings to us, and we ask you to guide us through this day, for we pray in thy name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance. Please stand. Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All right.
First order of business this morning is the minutes from last month. Gentlemen, have y'all had opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
Any additions or changes to the minutes? Brother Rouser?
Yes, sir.
Are you okay with the minutes?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Billingsley, you okay with the minutes?
Okay. I entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carried. Okay. First order of business this morning is the application for rezone. And my agenda's missing. Okay. Thank you. I don't know what I did with it. Okay. A motion to open public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carried. Public hearing is now open. We have a rezone request by Mr. Jeff Cox, rezoning C1 commercial to R1B. Who is speaking for the proponent?
I am Mr. Chairman, Steve Smith, here on behalf of Jeff Cox and the the Shire at Livingston.
Okay, Mr. Well, you making a presentation for them?
Yes, sir, if I could, I'd like to give a handout to each member here this morning on one of our exhibits. It's just a blow-up. It's easy to see and understand. Appreciate what property is located in relation to other property, and what exactly we're attempting to rezone. As I stated just a second ago, my name is Steve Smith, and I'm here on behalf of Jeff Cox and the Shire at Livingston. Our request is simple. We are simply requesting to rezone 7.53 acres of property that is currently located in the Livingston Township PUD. We are requesting to rezone the 7.5 acres from its current C1 zoning to a R1B zoning. This is a down zoning. We're taking commercial and putting it into residential. We had a timely mail out on our hearing today, and I did provide those return receipts to Mr. Weeks as evidence of our meeting that requirement under the ordinance. You'll see attached to our petition, we have 4 exhibits. The first Exhibit A is a meets and bounds description of the 7.53 acres we seek to rezone, which is required under the ordinance. Exhibit B is a new description of a 30-acre parcel that would be located in the Livingston PUD and would be zoned R1B if the rezoning is approved here today. As you can see on the handout I gave you, there are currently 22.47 acres zoned residential in the Livingston Township PUD. If you added 7.53 acres to the 22.47 acres, you get 30 acres. And that would be a total of 30 acres in the Livingston Township PUD. It would leave a total of 17.33 acres zoned commercial. Exhibit C to our petition is a site plan. It's a conceptual drawing, and it was never intended to be submitted as a preliminary plat or any kind of preliminary plat at all. It's a site plan. I stand here this morning admitting that there's a lot of things on our site plan that doesn't adhere to the Madison County zoning ordinances, and that would have to be addressed, and they would obviously have to come back in front of you for any preliminary plat approval. I want that to be clear. We didn't attach Exhibit C to try to show preliminary plat approval, anything else. Exhibit D is what I just handed you, and it shows the location of the 7.53 acres in relation to the property that's already zoned residential and in relation to the commercial that would be left. The Livingston Township PUD contains a total of 47.2 acres. As I stated a minute ago, 22.47 acres are residential, 24.86 acres are now zoned commercial. Again, if the rezoning is approved, it would increase the amount of residential acreage to a total of 30 acres and decrease the amount of commercial zone property to 17.33 acres. If you look at Exhibit C, our site plan, conceptual drawing, you'll see that we have on there a total of 87 lots, and which is allowed under 2706.02 of the Madison County zoning ordinance. In fact, the example under Section 27 of how many lots or dwelling units you can have is exactly what's represented on our site plan. The example in the ordinance is if you have 30 acres multiplied by 2.9 dwelling units per acre, you end up with 87 lots. That's what we have depicted on our site plan. No more. Each of these lots on our site plan and each lot that we would bring to this, that we bring to the Board of Supervisors in the future is going to represent a single family residence. No condominiums, no townhouses, no patio homes, all single family residences. I think you'll see that our plan is consistent with the intent and the purpose of the Livingston Township PUD and the requirements of a PUD under the Madison County zoning ordinances. This is found in Article 27. In fact, the 4 main criteria or aspects of PUDs under the zoning ordinance are, number 1, to make land areas as cohesive and coordinated units, to allow for more flexible and advantageous use of sites, to reduce the cost of residential development by allowing more dwelling units per gross acre. And number 4, to provide open space and common area for residential use by all the residents of a planned unit development. The Livingston Township PUD was originally approved based on these same criteria and others contained in Article 27 of the Madison County zoning ordinance. Again, this is simply a downzoning from C1 to R1, which we respectfully submit meets the criteria for PUD. An added feature on our site plan you'll see is that rather than only having 15% of open common area, our site plan proposes a total of 33.87%, which is more than double the common area required under the zoning ordinance. This obviously would benefit all of the residents in the PUD. I want to reiterate again to the commission that our Exhibit C, our site plan, does not and would not at this rezoning stage contain all of the criteria or data that would need to be contained in a preliminary plat. We have not done that. We are yet to do that because we're here today simply for the rezoning of 7.5 acres. You all are aware that any preliminary plat that we would bring before the Board of Supervisors would first have to be run through Mr. Scott Weeks, receive his approval, and receive the Board of Supervisors' approval. That's the way the ordinance is written. I think we'll also see that, and I anticipate a lot of comments this morning and input from neighbors and other people, and which is welcome. But I want to point out one thing, which is when this Livingston Township PUD was adopted, there has been no plat. There's been no plat ever filed in the land deed records in this county. In fact, this Livingston Township PUD was adopted based on a conceptual drawing, just like our conceptual drawing before you here today and attached to our petition. We're here this morning under one criteria in the ordinance, 806.03B. And we are here saying that the character of the neighborhood has changed to such an extent as to justify this reclassification and that there is a public need for additional housing. We believe that this change and need is clearly set forth on pages 4 through 9 of our petition. I want to go over briefly those points to prove that we meet the criteria. On pages 4 through 9, we set out 8 of the most impactful and job-creating commercial developments which occurred in Madison County since 2021. $70 million in permits were issued. Over 60 commercial permits were issued in 21 and 22. The Madison County Economic Development Authority records established that between October of 2017 and February of 2022, 18 new developments were started. And if you look in footnote number 1 on page 6 of our petition, you'll see all 18 of those listed. There's some tremendous companies and tremendous developments. Out of these developments, new developments, over 2,100 new jobs were created and $1.2 billion in investment. We submit to the members of the commission that all of this explosive economic development over the last 4 or 5 years has attributed to the per capita income of Madison County residents, which is in excess of $68,000. That's one of the very highest in the state of Mississippi. Looking at the census figures, when you compare the 2010 census with the 2020 census, you'll see that there were 95,000 people in Madison County in 2010. In 2020, that figure rose to 109,000, over a 14.5% increase, 14,000 new people in Madison County. Let's look at home sales in relation to our criteria for rezoning. When you look at the Central Mississippi Multiple Listing Service and all of their data, it shows you that existing home sales in the last 2 years hit the highest level in the last 15 years. It shows you that sale prices reached new highs. Inventory of homes for sale hit rock bottom, and homes sold in a record time. The listing service for 2021 and 22 shows that new listings rose by over 11.5%. Inventory levels of homes for sale decreased by 47.5%. Days on the market were down over 50%. And the month's supply of inventory was down by 35%, down to only 1.2 months. We submit to the members of the commission that all of these large and small economic developments in Madison County over the last 6, 8, 10 years have generated a substantial demand for housing and increased the need for housing. We submit that one doesn't have to look very far along to see that all of this economic development throughout Central and South Madison County has literally outpaced the supply of residential housing. Over the last 10 years, the character of the neighborhood where Livingston Township PUD is located has changed drastically. All you have to do is drive out Highway 463 to the intersection with 22 where Livingston is, and you can see the multitude of new subdivisions that were started and which have been built out. 10 years ago, half of that part of 463 out to 22 was not developed. Now, most all of it is developed in subdivisions and residential dwellings. When you look at Reunion, Devlin Springs, Hartfield, Jonestown, Noah's Mill, Eden, and Chestnut Hill, all of these are in the neighborhood. All of these have come from agriculture, farmland, to residential subdivisions. That's what we're trying to do here. I submit to the members of the commission and my clients submit that this rezoning of commercial property to residential would be nothing but a positive and beneficial impact on the Livingston Township PUD and the surrounding development. The current and newly zoned residential acres will contain a quality development. In fact, this development that my clients propose will be along the same lines as the township at Colony Park. If you've ever driven through that development, you'll see exactly what we're proposing and exactly what the quality of this development would be. For me, I haven't seen anything much nicer than the township at Colony Park anywhere I've been. And that's what we're proposing to do here. I also want to point out to the members of the commission that if the Livingston Township PUD was indeed proper in 2010, which we believe it was, and it was found to be consistent with or compliant with Madison County's comprehensive plan, its transportation plan, its land use plan, and goals and objectives, then certainly this rezoning of a mere 7.5 acres is consistent with all four elements of Madison County's comprehensive plan. Not only does this rezoning meet, or is it consistent with all four elements of Madison County's plan, it would be the highest and best use of this property. To date, there have only been 7 commercial buildings built at Livingston, covering about 6.5 acres. Everybody today can't afford hundreds of thousands of dollars for a lot. They can't afford $500,000 or $1 million houses, but they can afford a smaller lot like we're proposing, and they can afford a less expensive house like we're proposing. We believe, again, that this rezoning would complement the Livingston Township PUD and would complement all the other residential areas in the area. In conclusion, we submit that our petition to rezone and our petition here today meet and exceed the rezoning criteria contained in the Madison County zoning ordinance. We don't think anyone in this room could honestly deny that, number one, the character of the neighborhood has changed to the extent so as to justify this rezoning, and number two, that there is a public need for housing. This rezoning and eventual approval of this high-quality residential development would be the catalyst for the development of the Livingston Township PUD. We respectfully request that the Commission approve our rezoning petition and our rezoning request here this morning, and that the 7.53 acres addressed in our petition be rezoned from its current C1 classification to an R1B classification. I'd be happy to answer any questions from any members of the Commission.
I have a major question here. I read on here one of your drawings that the contours that are represented on this so-called preliminary plat was done by LiDAR. Is that correct?
Was what? I'm sorry?
By LiDAR.
I think that's what our engineer indicated on there.
Well, my question is, do these squiggly lines on this drawing indicate the actual contours and the steepness of the slopes on this hill? I know that area out there is very hilly. I don't see how anyone can build a house on a 30 by 120 foot lot with the slopes that are shown on this drawing. You do anything on a plane, but when it comes to building something on a side hill, you've got a lot of considerations to make with contours, water runoff, drainage on your neighbor. All these things have to be considered, and you can't do that on a side hill. I do not believe that you can build houses on a 30 by 120 foot lot on these side hills. It's just not going to be possible.
Well, sir, you know, there's been a lot of development in this entire country, and especially in this state, where a piece of ground that doesn't look like it's developable and is very hilly, people are able to grade and regrade and change elevations,
Right.
provide for water and drainage, and put water and sewer in. I don't pretend to be a contractor. I was a city attorney with the city of Ridgeland from '83 to '89. I've worked with planning commissions and with boards of aldermen, and I know how things can get done, and I've seen good developers do it. And I respectfully submit to this commission that my client is a very good developer. He's done numerous developments in Hawaii. He's done developments in California, in Washington, and Oregon. And he's a quality developer and knows how to develop. So I'm not going to refute what you're saying, but I know it has been done, and I think it can be done in the future. And again, I want to reemphasize, our conceptual drawing, our site plan is only that. I don't pretend or represent to this commission anything other than a proposed layout for the development and showing the 87 lots and the street and the entrance off of 463. All of that would be put in a preliminary plat and have to be approved by Mr. Weeks, and again, approved by the Board of Supervisors. But please understand, from my developer standpoint and Mr. Cox's standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on a preliminary plat when you don't even have the land rezoned for that use. So again, we're here today just asking for the rezoning of the 7.5 acres. The preliminary plat is a wholly separate process. We'll have to go through that. Mr. Weeks will have to approve that, and the Board of Supervisors will have to approve that, and we know that.
Mr. Weeks is not the only one that's got to approve the preliminary plat. It's got to come through planning and zoning. You might spend a lot of money developing your plans, but if they're not physically developed, I'm a civil engineer. I look at these kind of things. I don't believe that you can build on these side hills with a 30-foot wide lot when you've got neighbors downhill from you and your neighbors uphill from you, and you've got to do something with the water, and you're not going to be able to control it. I can guarantee you that. Have you driven through Chestnut Hill over there? They have big lots. They have a lot of room. They can control their water. Some places they can't. The side hills run off in the street, cover up the street. I hope the county, I don't know this, but I hope the county never took those streets over from the developer, because they are a mess. The last time I went through there, you had to detour around some of the soil flows that ran out across the road. So I'm just telling you, this opening up this for residential development with these small lots is not the thing to do. There are other things on this preliminary that personally I'm going to speak against, and that is access into Hickory Bend down here in the lower corner.
The emergency access?
Emergency access. Those emergency access tend to be done not on just an emergency, they get to be used on a regular basis unless there is absolute control with fence and gates that prevents cross-through traffic. And I believe after having driven through this Chestnut Hill area down here, there's going to be a lot of traffic going up through here headed up toward Livingston to the commercial area. So I do not, personally, I don't think that this ought to be done. I live in a subdivision where it was daisy chained to another subdivision, and we had almighty heck to get that access closed because of the traffic running through our neighborhood. So I ain't for it. I will not vote for anything that requires that promotes access between two subdivisions, period.
And I understand your position, and that's a proposal. That's not hard and fast. If the Board of Supervisors doesn't want that, they won't approve that. That's a proposal by us as a beneficial thing for the Livingston Township PUD and for Chestnut Hill subdivision. When you have a truly controlled emergency access, the only people that have access to the code or to the gate or to the lock are the policemen and firemen and ER. And those are the only people who have a right to use it. And I've seen it done 100 times, but I agree with it. It's a proposal. So if they don't want that proposal, or if the board doesn't want the proposal, then it won't happen.
Okay. It would have to be up to the Board of Supervisors, but
Yes, sir.
I think this commission would probably recommend that not be permitted.
That's fine with us.
Commissioner McKay, let me just interject here. I know we've got lots of people out here. You've raised some very important questions, and I hope that what I'm about to say will maybe alleviate some of these people's questions too. The only thing before the Planning and Zoning Commission today is the rezoning. That's right.
Great.
This document, and it gets thrown around semantics, but they're really terms of art when it comes to the ordinance. Site plan, development plan, preliminary plat, all that. I think, and Mr. Smith has tried to make that clear today, that this is only conceptual. He's just trying to show something, what they propose to do with the property, but there are numerous issues with what's proposed on there as far as setbacks, encroachment into Mansdale Livingston's, buffer zone. So that is by no means up for approval or
Oh, I understand
consideration
that.
today.
I
So
understand.
I
I'm
just-
glad you bring that up.
For
but,
your benefit and for everybody else's benefit, I just
Well-
wanted to make clear on that.
My point is, in approving something which in the future can't be developed, it's just like when they initially approved this PUD out here with just a site plan, an area, without regard to whether or not it could be developed or not. The reason why it hadn't been developed yet is because somebody took a look at it and said, how in the world are we gonna do a PUD on this hillside? But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I guess you've done a good job of presenting it. Any questions from our commissioners want to interject here? Mr. Rouser?
I have no questions.
Mr. Billings?
Bud Brown?
No, I have no question.
Okay. Then we need to close the public hearing before we
You want to hear from any
Your opposition.
get
opposition? or-
opposition first. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Okay. State your name and address, please.
Thank you, Chairman. John Lassiter. I live at 307 Moonlight Hollow in Flora, Mississippi. That's part of Chestnut Hill subdivision. I'm speaking on behalf of the board of the Homeowners Association at Chestnut Hill, and I'm speaking in the stead of Baxter Burns, who's our president. He couldn't be here today for travel responsibilities, but I can assure you that is not indicative of how serious he takes this matter. He's vehemently opposed, as is our entire neighborhood, to what's being proposed today. With respect to Mr. Clark, we know and understand that we're only here on the rezoning, but that cat doesn't need to get anywhere near out of the bag because we know how things work, and there will be momentum created. And the next thing you know, some of these items are being approved. My wife and I bought a lot in Chestnut Hill back in 2018. We saved up a considerable amount of money to do so. It was our intent and is our intent to live there for an extremely long time, to raise our kids there, who are 9, 6, and 4. They enjoy the rural living. They enjoy the country living. And with respect to Mr. Smith, we didn't buy in Ridgeland at Highland Colony for a reason. In fact, we moved out of Reunion for a reason, because of the density there and because of what Chestnut Hill in the Livingston area had to offer us. There's a commitment out there to preserving the landscape, responsible development, and again, rural country living with the quaint local amenities of Livingston. That was what we were promised when we bought. It's reflected in the plans that have been previously approved by the overlay district, by this commission and by the board. And the fact is that the neighborhood has not changed. The condition of it hasn't changed, and that is what makes it so desirable. That is what we purchased. Enter the Shires project, which seeks to double the number of lots on the same land area roughly. And I guess it's based on some housing need, but I can tell you there's 35 open lots in my neighborhood right now that this same developer, owns or controls. I can't speak to that. Maybe he doesn't own all those, but there's 35 lots that are open there that can be built on. There's certainly, to the extent that somebody wants to build out there, they can do so. But again, the Shires project seeks to double the number of lots. I don't have to tell you that's going to entail clear cutting some of this. It's going to entail the grading that he talked about to where this area becomes flat. It's going to entail zero lot line development, a lot of stuff that none of us purchased when we invested out here. The controlling landowner here and the developer, I know that the applicant here is Jeff Cox, who I respect as an industrial builder, but the developer here is a California resident. He's the same developer that developed my neighborhood, and like so many out-of-state developers, he is about carving this area up and getting the most he possibly can out of it for his profit. He's going to take that money back to California. We're going to be left with the residual effect of that here. This is the same developer that since I've been on the board since 2018 at Chestnut Hill, he has not offered a dime to improve the maintenance and what we're dealing with as a neighborhood. I think the chairman spoke to the roads out there. I echo his sentiment. That's not all. I mean, the drainage issues out there, if you look at our sewers, there are trees growing out of our sewer. All right, you can't drive on our roads. That doesn't even get into the maintenance of the common areas to the extent, that they controlled those. I've never seen him offer one dime to the maintenance and the wherewithal of our community since I've been out there. And yet he seeks to go 200 yards down the road and do it all over again and benefit from that. And I'll just tell you that our neighborhood does not take kindly to it. There is somebody local who stands to benefit from this, and that's Mr. Cox, who I respect, and I do a lot of construction litigation in my job, but and he does great work from what I understand, and his reputation precedes him. But he might benefit from this, but that's one local person, and there will be hundreds of Madison County landowners who will be negatively impacted by this project. And in talking to them, I'll just tell you they're going to have long memories about this if what was promised to them is undone. Livingston, the surrounding area, is beautiful. It has so much promise. It's weathered a storm of ownership and years of litigation that was driven by this same individual who seeks to do this, Mike Bollenbacher. We finally have gotten out of the haze of that litigation. I really do believe that Livingston has an opportunity to grow into what it was intended to be, which is a quaint commercial development where these local surrounding areas have access to it, and that's exactly how it needs to stay. So on behalf of the neighborhood, I will say that Chestnut Hill is vehemently opposed to any change of the zoning ordinance, the zoning of this area, and we intend to get what was promised to us. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, but we thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning. My name is John Scanlon. I'm an attorney. I don't live in the neighborhood, but I have been retained within the last 2 days by the Chestnut Hill Homeowners Association. And I did bring some material that I'm going to request be appended to the minutes. I do stand here to bring up just a few points, and I'll try to keep them brief. They're mostly surrounding points of zoning law, and I do appreciate the time that the commissioners are putting in and listening carefully to every presentation. I know that there's a lot of work that goes into that from y'all's end. I work with a lot of zoning boards. I'm going to speak on behalf of 2 days of conversations and work on this, which is not a lot. So if I'm mistaken about something, I'll be happy to be corrected. But it's my understanding that this area, and I have reviewed all of the online maps and the comprehensive plan of Madison County, is designated as commercial property within the comprehensive plan and the land use map. And the Mississippi codes and the Supreme Court have been very clear that when you rezone a property, it has to be done in harmony with a comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plans, as y'all know, are intended to be long-term documents, and there is a presumption of validity to zoning ordinances where the deference by the Supreme Court is given to the local authorities. Zoning ordinances are intended to be permanent, and they're intended to be difficult to change. And so a condition precedent before anyone will reclassify a property from one designation of residential to commercial or commercial to residential requires a change in the comprehensive plan. As far as I'm aware, there's been no such request to change the comprehensive plan. And again, I'm only a few days into this. So I would submit that what the petitioner seeks today is something that would be likely to be found by a court of competent jurisdiction as arbitrary and capricious and unsupported by substantial evidence, which are the legal standards for zoning for legal authorities. Although zoning is given deference, zoning boards and zoning commissions are given deference, there are 3 or 4 ways in which they can be overturned, and those are 2 of them. And we get into spot zoning a lot in my area of practice. I do a lot of zoning law, for those of you who don't know me, a lot of land use law. And if it's going from one level of commercial to another level of commercial, that certainly wouldn't require a change in the comprehensive plan, because the comprehensive plan doesn't use levels like C1, C2, C3, or one level of residential to another. But if you're changing the use from commercial to residential, or residential to commercial, or industrial to residential, or whatever the case may be, that requires a change in the comprehensive plan, and it sounds like the petitioner has not sought that. So that would be one thing that we think the commission should take very seriously when it makes its recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Secondly, the burden lies on the petitioner, as Mr. Smith pointed out, to prove what we, in my field of practice, call the modified Maryland rule, which is either a mistake in the original zoning, or, which I don't think they're seeking today and I don't think they're arguing, or either a change in character of the neighborhood and a public need has occurred justifying the rezoning. I've read Mr. Smith's petition, or the Cockshire, as I call it, petition, and I listened to the presentation today, and what I hear doesn't have anything to do with the neighborhood. I read a petition that talks about what's happening in the cities of Ridgeland, what's happening in the cities of Kenton, what's happening in the city of Gluckstadt, and what's happening in other parts of the county. And it begs the question for this commission that when you are looking at your legal standards, as is your duty to do so, how big is the neighborhood that we're talking about here? I believe there's a statement inside the petition that says we can all agree that South and Central Madison County is undergoing a change.
Sorry, we're getting a little feedback.
No problem, and I'll try to wrap this up. I don't want to get necessarily into a lot of case law, although I have cited a few cases in my 3-page presentation here that I'm going to submit. There's another point, though, and it's my understanding that this property actually lies within the Mansdale-Livingston Heritage Preservation Overlay District. And if I'm mistaken about that, please stop me. But it's my understanding that just a few days ago, the Mansdale-Livingston Heritage Preservation District Commission met on this, and the Mansdale-Livingston Heritage Preservation Overlay District, that's a mouthful, of course, is found in Section 19 of the county zoning ordinance, and it specifies that this is to be an area for rich and beauty and historical significance to ensure harmonious, orderly, and efficient growth and development of the district. It's looking for things that would not be allowed would be high-density type residential, such as apartments or residential condominiums. And I heard Mr. Smith say they're not seeking that, but the purpose behind the district and the thrust behind the district, the overlay district, as I understand it, promulgated by the Board of Supervisors in their zoning ordinance, is to keep density low in this area. So we would submit that it violates the purpose of the overlay district as well as violates the PUD. And one other matter which is just legal in nature is a matter of notice. And again, I may be mistaken about this, but I've reviewed the notice of hearing. I believe the burden lies on the petitioner to submit by certified mail and registered receipt requested that he has notified all the surrounding landowners. He may well have done that. I didn't hear him present it this morning. But I've read the content of the notice, and it does not match up perfectly with the actual content of his rezoning request. The notice says we're looking for 7.53 acres to be rezoned. But the petition says there's a second part of that, and that is that we want that to be recombined and redesignated with the PUD. Now, as I understand it, a change to the PUD requires a similar public hearing under the zoning ordinance, not under state law, with similar notice to be made. And I don't believe, if I'm reading the zoning ordinance correct, that that has been achieved by the petitioner. So in closing, we would request that this commission not ask for a ruling that would likely be reversed by a circuit court as arbitrary and capricious and unsupported by substantial evidence. And instead, stick with the zoning that was put in place by the Board of Supervisors, which is intended to be permanent, because this would be inconsistent with the surrounding district, and we don't believe there's been any comparable evidence to show otherwise, and recommend denial. And with that, I would like to submit my 3-page document to the attorney or to Mr. Weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Is there any other comments from the attendees? Yes.
My name is David Hand. I live at 108 BIDON Place in Livingston neighborhood. right before Chestnut Hill and Livingston Township. You know, I wasn't really planning on speaking, but I thought it was important. You know, might be one of the youngest in this room, and it doesn't take much knowledge to realize that this is not the best for that area. The neighborhood has not changed, and even as young as I am, it's very easy to see why people moved out there, why I bought a house out there. You know, I could have lived in Reunion on top of people, but I chose not to, and it was for a reason. You know, my wife and I are both from the South. She graduated from Ole Miss, hotty toddy, but we lived in Denver for 10 years. I saw this very exact thing Mr. Smith is speaking of. You know, the population's going up, people are moving to the area, so they build these high-rises. It created crime, it created traffic, and it created everything that we are all against here today. And I just thought it was important for myself to stand up, being in a younger generation, and it's not hard to see that this is wrong. This is not why people moved out to the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hand. Is there anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name's Kevin Watson. I own or purchased yesterday Lot 10 at Chestnut Hill. It's my understanding, if you look at the website, that where they advertise Livingston, that there were originally 50 lots proposed here in this development. 44 of them were going to be cottages, and 6 of them were proposed to be residential lakeside lots. And that's the reason I bought. I bought based upon, you know, the area, less density, a lot of things that hadn't been taken into, and Ken Primos, who's on the overlay district commission, he can speak to that. I think he can provide some background there, and also I believe Mr. Clark has a copy of the recommendation of the overlay district against approval of the rezoning, and they make reference to the 50 lots, and I think it was 44 cottages and 6 lakeside lots. Contrary to what Mr. Smith says, the character of the neighborhood has not changed. I mean, I enjoyed him pointing out the economic development that's going on in Madison County and the great real estate market, but that doesn't mean it's changed at Livingston. So, you know, the increase in density, and while it may just be a mere, as he pointed out, 7.5 acres, it's all about the money. And it's all about a California developer. He's going to develop these lots, and he's going to leave us with the traffic problems associated with it. Just to your point, Mr. Chairman, as far as developability is concerned, the proposed access to this development is 550 feet from the intersection of Highway 463 and Highway 22. I'd submit to you that contrary to what I've heard, that MDOT has not been approached for this intersection, and nor will it be approved because of its proximity to the intersection of 463 and 22. One other point I'd like to make is it's not just Chestnut Hill subdivision that's here today opposing this rezoning. There are other subdivisions represented. Noah's Mill, Stonebridge, of the, I don't know, 15, 20 people that are here, how many of you are in favor of the rezoning? Would you raise your hand? So I just say to you, there's no need for it. The surrounding subdivisions say there's no need for it. We'd ask the Planning and Zoning Commission to recommend against this rezoning. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can close the public hearing.
Did you want to reply, Steve?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Just a few points.
Okay.
When I was city attorney at Ridgeland, we had these situations come up all the time. And there may be a lot of reasons for somebody disliking a development, not wanting a development, not agreeing with the number of lots in a development.
Sure.
But there's one basic principle in the United States that, thank God, is the law. And it's this: a property owner has the right to use his property for its lawfully zoned use, regardless of whether a neighbor likes it or dislikes it or anything else. And a property owner has a right to present a plan, a preliminary plat, get it approved, and construct what's lawfully allowed on his property. That's all we have ever intended to do. Now, all of this connection by Chestnut Hill subdivision, all of this adverse impact, and all of this harm that it would cause out there, and how they wanted to live in big lots. When you look at Exhibit C, we were required to show the adjoining property owners. The adjoining property owners, being Chestnut Hill, are about 1/4 of the portion of this development. The only place Chestnut Hill touches the Shire development is down here between the proposed access road and 463. Now, how they're going to be so adversely impacted is beyond me, because all of the rest of these property owners over here on every other side aren't here. They aren't objecting. So I just wanted to point that out to the commission when all of these comments, unsupported comments, are made. It's just not the truth. You know, everybody has a right to appear and voice their opinion. I respect that very much so, having been on both sides of the fence, both as a city attorney and representing developers and contractors. But we have laws and ordinances because the rule of law is more important than what any one of us individuals or group of individuals thinks. We're not here today to get a preliminary drawing, conceptual drawing approved. It is obvious and admitted that there are numerous modifications that would have to be made if we ever expected to get a preliminary plat approved. We know that. I came here today knowing that and representing that to everyone. When Mr. Scanlon says you got to go get a comprehensive plan amended before you can ask for rezoning, I think he needs to check the law and the case law, because we're here today to get simply one thing: get 7.53 acres rezoned. If we are subsequently required to ask to amend the plan unit development or the comprehensive plan, we can do it. We will do it. We have no choice but to do it if that's what the Commission, Board of Supervisors request. So that's not a basis to deny this rezoning. Mr. Watson talked about the overlay district recommendation against this project. And when you look at their minutes, every reason to deny our request for rezoning deals with preliminary plat matters. Every one of them: density, 60-foot buffer, other buffers that may be required, open space, the MDOT approval of the access, secondary access road, the emergency access, setbacks, square footage of houses. Every one of them deal with the preliminary plat approval. Not one of them deal with rezoning. So we submit that our presentation, our facts, and our application meet the criteria to obtain a rezoning of these 7.5 acres from commercial to residential. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir, still open.
I'm Ken Primos. I'm on the MLHPD board. I'm not here to speak for them, but I think they would agree with what I'm going to say. We have to, what Steve said is correct in a lot of ways, but we also talked about at the meeting, you know, what has been approved and what we approved back, I think, in 2010. And it was, we went through a whole, I mean, it was a long period of time to get and work with the developer to get this correct. And part of what was taken into consideration was how many lots are at Chestnut Hill and how many residential lots they wanted to have at Livingston. Because there was a tremendous amount of opposition from the community about, you know, how many rooftops are going to go out there. And we agreed on this section of residential that were there at Livingston that they want to change and increase in size and density. The density that Steve referred to in all the neighborhoods around in the area that I personally was involved in, you know, you're talking 12,000 square foot lots. You're talking here, you know, 3,000 or 4,000 square foot lots. It's a tremendous density, and you're right about the drainage. You're correct about that. So our meeting the other night was to try to listen to what he had to say, and we opposed the rezoning of the commercial area. And we were fully aware that that was the main issue. The petitioner submitted the preliminary plat. We didn't ask for it. He brought it in there, and it was laid out, and it was called a preliminary plat. And we all know what a preliminary plat is. That's what you're going to put down. That's what you're going to do. Whether that was their intent or not is beside the point. That's what it said. And you got a copy. I got one over there too. And it's wrong. It's a lot of stuff that was wrong, and you couldn't ignore it in the meeting. We had a room full of people, more than just here, and everybody in there was opposed to it. And so you can't ignore what the people want. They're the ones that live there. They're the ones that have the money invested. It's their place. They're the ones that bought it based on what was told that was going to be there. And, you know, it's just not fair to go in there and try to change things. Now, one other thing, the whole idea of Livingston was put together before there was the proper kind of zoning for the county. But this board, the district, the MLHPD, and the Board of Supervisors worked together to get it done. This developer, and I can sit here all day long and tell you about it, did not do a lot of what they said they were going to do. They didn't build what was approved. They submitted plans. I know this ain't nothing to do with the zoning, but I'm just telling you, this developer doesn't do what he says he's going to do. So if they're talking about increasing the density without a lot of detail and without architectural design, without everything that everybody in the neighborhood gets to see, it needs to be left alone. And leave it alone. Keep it what's approved, and don't change it, because they don't do what they say they're going to do. And those buildings out there, those commercial buildings, were not built according to the plans. And we went out there to look at them. The county attempted to try to get it right, and we couldn't get them to cooperate. And that's the history of it, and it's not going to change because it's the same guy. So we're opposed to the rezoning, but we're also opposed to a whole lot more than that we see coming down the road that's going to cause problems for everybody else. So that's what I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Randolph. Anything else? Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Motion to close the public hearing, please. moved and,
I've got a question, Mr. Chair.
okay, come on.
I'd like to address this to our attorney. There's 2 or 3 things that have been said that I'd like to get your clarification on. And I think it was Mr. Watson that noted that the character of the neighborhood hasn't changed, or has changed. What's the criteria for determining what a change would be and how you would go about determining whether it's a correct change or incorrect?
I don't think that there is any criteria. I mean, it's exactly what that says in the ordinance.
Well, then who makes the decision?
You guys do.
So for me to...
You make the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors based on the presentation of Mr. Smith and the opposition of everyone that's spoken here today. I mean, it's, you know...
Well, let me ask about the notices. I think Mr. Scanlon made the note that it wasn't properly advertised, or the neighbors were not given proper notice. Was it you, Mr. Scanlon, that talked about this?
The version I saw, yes, sir, had only the rezoning request and not the PUD amendment request in it. So
Is there a conflict here since it wasn't advertised as such?
It's yes, there is a rezoning, but Scott and I talked about this at length. The PUD amendment. This entire piece of property that you see here is currently a PUD, okay? So there's not an expansion of the footprint of the PUD. There's not a reduction of the footprint of the PUD. What he's requesting is just a change of designation of property inside the footprint of the PUD. As a matter of fact, don't think there's any more, you can't get a PUD anymore, is that right, Scott? Yeah, so those are, it's basically a historic district at this point. Anything else that would come new would be a PURD, planned unit residential.
Would the requirements of a PUD be still in force?
Yes, sir, yes. It's still a part of our ordinance, it's just there for historic district purposes, I guess. Properties that were designated as a PUD prior to the amendment of the ordinance.
Well, let me ask you this: would you address the issue of whether or not this is a sound move for the board to approve or disapprove this action?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have a vote.
I know. I understand that.
Or fortunately, maybe I should say.
I understand that.
You know, I've only got the ordinance and my interpretation of that ordinance. So whether this is a sound move or not, I think you have to, as you've heard here today, you've got a delicate balancing act of the rights of the developer as the property owner versus the rights and concerns of citizens that are around there, live there. You know, that's a delicate balance that only you guys can make and recommend to the Board of Supervisors, and they can make.
Understand. Does the criteria that has been submitted here meet the code as far as your interpretation?
As far as my interpretation, yes. The petition is proper, the request is proper. Whether or not you guys agree, disagree, recommend or not recommend is completely up to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Brings up a question to me is, were any of the owners of land on the north side of 463 included in this notice? Because they fall within the dimensional requirements. I don't see in this list here anyone whose address is on 463 as a property owner. Mr. Smith, can you address that?
Yes, sir. The statute says you are required to give notice to people within 160 feet of the property. There's no one on the north side that would be within 160 feet.
But they own the property.
They may own it,
but they own the property.
But they're not required to get a notice. And the Madison County zoning ordinance says that you are not required by law to get a notice, but it is recommended and required by the ordinance. So we did what Mr. Weeks required us to do and provided him with all of the return receipts. Yes, sir.
Okay, I thought the landowners were to be notified by,
If you're within 160 feet only.
say that again?
If you're within 160 feet of the property to be rezoned.
Okay,
They
well,
are
there's
within that. They are within
there's property
160
with
feet.
160 feet of this red zone you've got on here. There's gotta be somebody on the north side of 463 that owns property there.
May not be any houses over there, but there's a homeowner or landowners.
I don't think they are within 160 feet of the property. We gave notice to everybody that we know of is within 160 feet.
Right of way of 463 is not 160 feet. So there should be somebody, some landowners on the north side there that should have been notified.
I would like to ask Mr. Primo's a question. Commercial property could consider many different things of commercial type facilities to be built there. What do you think the position would be for the homeowners for undesirable commercial properties to be built or filled in with buildings?
Well,
let's take a service station or a fuel stop and a convenience store. What would be your position on that?
Well, the overlay, the overlay district has got written into the zoning ordinance, what can be put in.
I understand,
in there.
I understand, but I'm just thinking out loud, had you rather have a commercial facility there than a residential section?
Well, when you go back, you refer to like to a C station. There's certain areas.
Okay.
There's certain areas where certain kinds of designate.
I understand.
Where that can go. And that can't go in this particular area that we're talking about.
But there's probably commercial properties that you would not consider desirable for this site.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how are we going to address that when it comes up if it stays commercial?
Well,
Same way.
there's certain types of businesses that can go into these areas that's already been put into the ordinance.
So
It's
it
a
would
long
have to
list
be
of them.
something very similar to what's at Livingston now that could only go there.
Right. That's right. In fact, down on
Is
the
that
corner.
spelled out? Is that
That's in the ordinance, yeah.
In the ordinance?
It's in the ordinance. And also you've even got down at the corner of 463 and 22, there's a section that was carved out to allow for a convenience store.
Okay.
If they ever want to. And that was part of the plan. When the overlay district was established and done, part of the negotiation with all the landowners up and down from China Grove Church all the way to Highway 22, every single person had to agree to it. And it was a lot of detail. Central Mississippi Planning helped us because I was the one that went and talked to everybody and laid it all out and got all that done. So there's very few places along 463 that can even be commercial because of that. You got the corner of Gluckstadt Road and 463. You got the corner of 22 and 463. And then you got, and that's pretty much it. There's a little bit of commercial at Reunion Boulevard. That's it. And that's because of that overlay district and established all that. And then the types of businesses, you can't, like, there's not going to be any strip clubs, things like that.
I understand.
That's spelled
I
out
understand, but
specifically.
I would have to believe that if you had a choice, if Chestnut Hill had a choice of a residential section or a commercial district that might not include something that would be desirable, what's going to be their position then?
That's just.
I can see another conflict.
It could be, and they can fight it out then.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
how you do that.
Thank you.
I don't want, just briefly, that's section 1903 of the zoning ordinance, Mr. Miller. There's a number of commercial uses expressly prohibited. I think the answer to your question as to whether they want it to remain commercial, I think the answer is yes. They oppose the rezoning, it's commercial now. Yes, they would prefer it to stay commercial within the confines of the document that is presumed to be valid and permanent. And just for your example, for example, service stations, that's expressly prohibited. I know you were just using an example, but I just want to bring to the commission's attention the actual code section.
I couldn't help but wonder about how that would be addressed.
I think it's a good question. Thank you.
Okay. Let's redo this. We get a motion to close the public hearing?
Yeah, I think Reverend Brown made that motion, and, well, I think you started talking.
I
Did
did.
you second that?
Second.
Okay, all right.
All right. Brother Rouser, are you here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, all minds clear. Since we have closed the public hearing, we'll entertain a motion as how we're gonna act on this petition. I know, we have, the letter from the Preservation District out there, and they're unanimously opposed to the changes in the zoning. So I'd entertain a motion from the commission. Yea or nay? Brother Rouser, you there?
Yes, I'm here. I was wondering because I thought I heard Andy say that they met all of the qualifications based on just rezoning. And if that be the case,
Okay, he's going to answer that.
Right, Dr. Rouser, what I'm saying is that the petition is properly, I believe, is properly before you, as far as whether they have met the requirements of the, to justify a rezoning. Mr. Smith spoke to that, and others spoke to that as well in opposition. So as to how the commission will vote is up to you guys based on the presentation that you have heard today and your recommendation, well, I guess taking into consideration as well the recommendation of the MLHPD district. But I want to make clear that those run concurrently with MLHPD and planning and zoning. In other words, MLHPD can deny or can recommend to deny. Planning and zoning can recommend approval, or vice versa. Y'all can be on the same page. You can be on different pages. That doesn't matter. Both of your recommendations will be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors. So, based on what you've heard here today as the petitioner and the opposition, the commission has a decision to make on what their recommendation to the Board of Supervisors is going to be. Does that answer your question, Dr. Rouser?
Is that clear, Dr. Rouser? Got that?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. It almost appear as a dilemma.
Well, not so much.
And we motion to table for further study.
Are you making that a motion?
Yes, sir.
I could not hear his motion. What,
His motion is, he motioned that we table it for further study. We have a second? Okay. The motion fails to get a second, so we'll have to have another motion.
Well, I motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the rezone.
second that motion?
Second.
Say again?
Mr. Bellinsley, have a motion to approve. Yeah, I'm here. Okay.
That's to rezone the,
Approval,
Approval to rezone.
All right, Dr. Rouser moved to approve. Reverend Brown, did you second that? Did I heard, okay, I'm just making sure I'm hearing right. There's a lot of talking going on.
here, this is to rezone the 7.53 acres from commercial to residential.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
All right. Does that automatically put it in the PUD, or does that require something else?
That is.
It's in the PUD.
Right.
Now, already in the PUD.
That's
isn't
the
it?
PUD. That's the picture of the PUD. Changing designations of property inside of the PUD.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the rezone from C1 to the PUD. Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 And those opposed, no.
That's 3 yeses and 2 nos. Is that what I heard? Is that correct?
See, Mr. Rouser was a yes. I don't know, I didn't hear what Bill said.
Bill, was that a yay or a nay? Nay, okay.
I vote against.
Okay.
Okay, so that's 3-2. All right, gentlemen. That concludes
Yes, sir.
that order of business.
Next agenda item, I guess, would, whatever next date is. Is there a date? I lost my agenda.
The 20th, third Thursday in October because of the flea market. All right. I move we make that the 20th of October.
Second.
Motion and second. Those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, done.
The previous motion was voted down.
No, it was a 3-2 yes vote.
Okay. All right.
All right, all lines clear? Move we
Yes,
adjourn.
sir.
Motion we adjourn.
So move. Second.
Moved and second. All those in favor, close them, go home.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Rouser.